Yeah.
Oh, I was volunteering, but they didn't need me.
Oh, okay.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to those watching on the video. We wish you were here, and you might wish you were here too, because after church today, we get to eat chili. So we were just talking food, and yes, please, chili. We're on the second to last chapter. This one, I think we'll go fairly quickly.
I was right, you were wrong.
Chapter 9 this week, the whirlwind principle. And I wrote myself a note, skim baby skim. We're not gonna get.
Oh, this is a good one.
Well, we'll get through, we'll make sure we get through the talking points. If we want to circle back to anything, we can. But I'm not gonna get too much into very interesting, but not as church relevant
Yeah, very.
science and stuff about planets and planetary formation and Big Bang, all of that stuff.
That's what I told Roger, this one was too scientific.
But this one, I think, this chapter is a little bit more hypothetical, a little more imaginative. I think this is just trying to get folks to engage their brains and think outside their normal boxes and just think of the possibilities of what God is up to and what it means for us. I think it gets into extraterrestrial life a little bit too, and what that possibility is and what that would mean. That would definitely mean that we aren't the center of the story, right? That's one of the themes of this book. What if there's other intelligent life out there? What would that mean? Lots of science fiction movies have played that out of how the church would react if it turns out that there was another planet. Maybe, instead of Adam and Eve, Bleep and Blorp or whatever it is, So, he doesn't go that far, but the first couple pages, he talks about a splinter Catholic group. This is on page 125 and following.
Some kid is not having.
Yeah. Couldn't tell for a second if that was a kid screaming or somebody using a drill. Yeah. Both find a way to penetrate.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a tough job sometimes being a nursery attendant. Anyway, splinter Catholic group that is even farther creationist than Ken Ham and the other ones he's talking about, to the point that they would say that the Earth does not revolve around the sun. It's called what was it called? They have a show called The Principle that challenges the Copernican principle that says no, the Earth is not the center of the world, the Earth revolves around the sun. So they say, no, never mind all of that, the Earth is the center of the universe, everything else revolves around us. Let's see, page 126, that's very good. Yeah, I kind of think so. Page 126 down, let's see, last paragraph there. One of the reasons Sungenis and his group dislike the Copernican principle is that they understand it to mean that because the Earth is not in a special place, then human beings are not a special species. The world has been shaped by two great assertions. One places us in the center of it all, and the other one relegates us to utter insignificance, writes Rick Delano, the writer and producer of The Principle on the film's website. But the Copernican principle says nothing of the kind. It's not a principle about the relative significance or specialness of creatures, human or otherwise. It just describes things that we observed. Right? We can attach significance to that or not. But all the Copernican principle is saying is that this is what we observed. This is what our observations and our hypotheses and our experiments and our instruments have told us. And we've checked that against other things, and then we believe that to be true.
And he goes on to talk about next thing here, but it doesn't mean one or the other. It's not an if then statement.
But clearly this ties into the whole Job thing, right? If I'm not the center of this story, what does that mean for me? What does that mean about God? I thought God was like this. If God isn't like this, then does God mean anything? And some folks in the Catholic Church, back with Copernicus and Galileo, reacted that. If you're challenging how we view the world, that means you're challenging how we believe God made the world. That means we're challenging our place in the world, and it all falls. So page 127, then he gets into the whirlwind principle, because his kind of response to the movie The Principal, saying, okay, well, let's bring Job back into this. Let's bring God speaking from the whirlwind back into this. Let's see. The whirlwind principle states, this is the middle of 127. The human species is not a central, specially favored species in the cosmos. According to what Job encounters with God from the whirlwind, showing him all the different creatures and all the different parts of creation, from the foundations and the water being held back, and behemoth and leviathan, and all the things we've been talking about. That says, based in scripture, based in Job, the human species is not a central, specially favored species in the cosmos.
That,
We've been given a special vocation.
like,
We might have a special relationship, but that doesn't mean that we are central or favored over anything else, because at the end of creation, God looked at all that was made and said that it was good, and then it was very good, not just humans.
well, it's sort of liberating in a way.
Yeah,
It takes a lot of responsibility.
Yeah.
When you consider it that way.
yeah. And part of that responsibility is what we talked about a few chapters ago of that we are the cause of all the bad things in the world. So that, I mean, there's atonement, what Jesus did on the cross to save us from our sin, that's one thing. But it's another thing to then take the following steps to say, and every earthquake and every, hurricane and every disease, that's all because of our sin. That's, now you could go, wars, definitely, consequence of sin. How viruses spread, how we don't take care of folks, you got like the Jimmy Carters of the world who are trying to eradicate diseases like, what is it called? Guinea worms, I think, where, by just installing clean toilets, sanitary toilets, right? The fact that those conditions exist, sure, we could attribute that to sin, but, the fact that viruses exist as a part of creation, that's not on us. The fact that earthquakes happen, that's the shifting plate tectonics, that's been going on since before we were, if you believe that the earth is a little longer than 6,000 years old, then we can't take credit for plate tectonics.
Right.
Sometimes you hear about mining or fracking or whatever, might make things a little unstable, might not help if you take out the wolves out of the ecosystem and all of a sudden there's deer eating everything, okay, we can have some impact on our ecosystem, but we're not responsible.
What I find really interesting is we didn't know anything about the tectonic plate movement until 1967.
Was it that late?
Yeah,
I thought there were some theories.
no, well, there was people
Nice.
theorizing it, but nobody ever concreted it until 1967, which to me is just mind blowing.
I know there's a place we never, you live in a place and there's things to see close by and you never quite get all of them because you're like, oh, I have time, and then
Yeah.
you move. So there was a place maybe an hour and a half from where we lived in California, where not only could you see the wildflowers bloom in the spring, but you could go and actually get up high enough to see the San Andreas Fault. Never made it out there.
Even the sidewalks, we were shit. But I mean, they didn't really concrete tectonic movement until 1967, which to me is just the year I graduated from high school. I mean, it's not long ago.
It's not that long ago. I mean, if you think about it, I remember in late 80s, was it 87, the big earthquake in San Francisco. There was another one in Northridge down by LA. And those were huge damage. And if you think from that perspective, well, man, we've only been really looking at this for 20 years. And then again, it depends on your perspective. If you go to school like I did, and you're like, oh yeah, this is my tectonic, blah, blah, blah. You get it in your head like, oh, people know this.
Yeah.
But you don't get that piece where it's like, oh, actually, you've only known about this for a little bit. I'm still thinking. So.
Yeah, they finalized it in 1967. Before that, was just theory.
Yeah. Let's look at, let's see, down a couple paragraphs on 127, Book of Job. Job's journey, as you recall, began on a sunny day atop the human social pyramid. His significance not only surpassed all others in us as a human being, he was above every creature on earth. He was righteous, generous, fair-minded, wise, respected by all. He was the very reflection of the God who sat enthroned high above heaven and earth, or so he thought. His descent took him from the pinnacle of human society to its cellar. This is a great quote from the Book of Job. But now they make sport of me. Those who are younger than I, whose fathers I would have disdained to set with the dogs of my flock, he laments 31. Okay, so he had a pretty high opinion. So from the bottom, everything looked different, and it was from that dislocation that over the course of 36 chapters, he argued with his friends over the meaning of wisdom, the elusiveness of justice, and the character of God. He thought he could go no lower. My spirit is broken, my days are extinct, the grave is ready for me. But the whirlwind showed up and drove poor Job even further from the good things of life, further from decent society, further from justice, further from security. The direction was outward, away from human civilization and into the howling waste, the desolation of sand and rock, the empty and unmapped lands, and into the presence of chaos itself. What he found out there, surprisingly, was life. True, it was not life as he normally thought about it. It was alien and strange, even freakish. It was wild and free. It mocked human civilization and refused human control. Some of it was modest, nearly invisible. Some of it was unthinking and violent. Maybe Leviathan is a virus, right? Some was primordial and fearless. It was not pretty, but it was life, thriving in places and conditions we could never hope to survive, far beyond the comforts of human cities. God, you will remember, was the light of my all. Like scientists with their Copernican principle, before his descent, Job carried with him a working, if unnamed, assumption about the centrality of human beings, a kind of inverted whirlwind principle. This faulty assumption was challenged by traveling to extremes and going beyond them, by being shown what could not normally be seen. The whirlwind took Job on a tour that was, in its day, cosmic in the full sense of the word. One can never be sure, but I like to think that if Job were written today, it's not to the desert that the whirlwind would take him, but somewhere far greater in scale and strangeness. So just to put it out there, he says, Job was taken and was shown things that could not normally be seen. Name some. What are some things we would not normally be able to see?
Like now,
Yeah.
the molecular level of
Okay.
connections there, or the cosmic level, how the galaxies interact, like they
Okay.
span far enough out.
Bottom of the ocean.
Yeah.
Bioluminescent stuff living under tremendous amounts of pressure.
Like the sulfur vents.
Oh, yeah.
So that we just recently discovered.
Yeah. Mars. They think they've got some microscopic traces of something up there. What is that?
I find it funny because he goes on to talk about more with the whole, we have to be the center.
Right.
And why, and I never had it on wrap my head around, why would discovery alien life wreck religion here?
Right.
Because of God, the creator, it should not
No.
impact at all.
It wrecks it if you feel as though humans are the center of the stars.
Right.
Yeah, Lois and I were talking about that. She said, well, how come we haven't seen it? I said, well, because if you have a pen of pigs and you have a pen of dogs or chickens or whatever, and you don't want them to interact, you make sure they stay far enough apart so they cannot interact.
Mm.
And it's the same thing there. If you put enough light years between us and somebody else, physically, it's an impossibility to have those come together.
And that's what like the whole next big chunk of this chapter is about is it's called the face of our wilderness. Okay, yeah, what are the odds that these planets exist? What are the odds that the planets would form, that they would form in the, what do they call it?
Goldilocks.
The Goldilocks zone, not too hot, not too cold, just right. And that they would form with the right elements, with the right, maybe they need a moon, maybe they need something. And the distances we're talking about and the probability we're talking about, odds are there are other planets with life, maybe even intelligent life, but it's so rare that maybe we are the only ones. But if there are others out there, it's so
That to me is very,
vast.
that's very arrogant. I was telling her, I said, dinosaurs wouldn't have been wiped out, we'd be reptilian today, and so maybe there's a planet somewhere that are reptilian smart people,
Yeah. So, but that's just it. Like, I mean, that's what Star Trek does. That's what all the different,
Yeah.
sci-fi worlds do. Is they say, okay, well, let's go to these other places and meet these other species. But yeah, if Job were to come now, if God were to show up to Job and be like, let me show you some things.
Yeah.
It might be reptile aliens on some other planet, pushing their little eggs in a stroller, who knows what it would look like there. But it would be the same thing of like, you don't know everything. You're not what you think. So yeah, the next few pages, go into stargazing, exoplanets, life. There's a section called God's ETs, not a section, but it talks about God's ETs. Think about the Webb telescope that just was put into space last year. This was written almost 9 years ago now. It's seeing things that we've never been able to see. It has the technology to be able to analyze, and I don't even know the processes, what elements are present in the atmosphere of a distant exoplanet. Could it have moisture? Could it have water? Could it have the conditions that might sustain life as we understand? So just with a telescope and a computer software and what it can do.
There's some place in West Virginia, I can't think where it is, because when we lived in Charlottesville, one of the couples that belonged to St. Mark's, he was kind of been sent out there, that it's a scientific place in West Virginia, up on the mountain where they study all the stars and there's a telescope up there and so forth. But I can't remember where it is in West Virginia.
But humans haven't changed, I mean, as far as science goes, because even during the time of when they found out that we weren't the center of the universe, we were going around the sun instead of the sun going around us, and there was so much pushback from that. You have the same problem today, when they put up the new telescope and they went farther deeper than they could have gone before in the black areas, there were a lot of astronomers and scientists that really pushed back on that too, about their sacred cow got gored, so they're still pushing back on that, so.
That's the
always
price
the
of
case.
curiosity, is
Yeah.
you might stumble across some things that challenge what you thought.
And you still have the same issue, nothing's changed
Yeah,
as far as humans.
I was thinking, there's something strange that's landed out there in the desert there.
Yeah.
It's in Utah, and Arizona.
yeah, Area 51.
But I think they've proven what everything was so far.
Ironically, about Area 51 in 1953, when they thought they found that crash. At that time, the Skunk Works was out there and they were developing, the Cold War was being started up and they were manufacturing stuff and it crashed something. So
Yeah.
somebody saw this thing crash and
Yeah.
somebody brought the idea, well, it must be alien, and the Air Force says, okay, that's cool.
Because they didn't much.
Everybody know what it was. So people think it's an alien? Yeah, we accept an organization says, we'll even check into alien, because it was a way of hiding what we were building, so.
Sure. Keep people distracted.
So if you wanna think it's alien, that's great.
But
We'll know that.
the first even exoplanet wasn't confirmed until 92.
Yeah.
So if you're talking about plate tectonics in 67, first exoplanet wasn't discovered till 92. They're still learning more, they're still finding more. We don't know what's all out there. At the top of 133, there's a quote from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I think science fiction has a place in the religious conversation because it says, well, here's the current state of things, and let's imagine what it would be if we played these things out. Think of like Fahrenheit 451. Think of 2001. Think of Brave New World. These are things that take current trends and say, well, what if we look at this? And I think that's a prophetic voice to say, you better look out what you're doing right now, or something bad might come with this. But this Hitchhiker's Guide is if you've never read it and you can handle absurdity, it's fun.
It's great.
It says, space is big. You just won't believe how vastly, hugely, mind-bogglingly big it is. I mean, you may think it's a long way down the road to the chemists, British, but that's just peanuts to space. Big it is, so big that if we hold to the Copernican principle and assume that these local stars are not particularly favored with planets, we can project this number out to billions of Earth-like planets in the Milky Way galaxy alone, not to mention the whole of cosmos.
So, the quick math, there's a estimated 100 billion stars in the Milky Way. If 1% has planets, period. 1% has Goldilocks planets, 1% has life.
So 1 and 1 and 1.
1% and 1% has intelligent life, that'd be 1,000 intelligent lives out there.
Just in our galaxy.
In our galaxy.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's multiple galaxies that we know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
We're,
It's 1% of each one of those subcategories having that, so.
yeah, we're way out on one little edge of the galaxy, so you can see our whole galaxy, we're way out on the end of it.
Yeah,
and so he says this is good news for the whirlwind principle, that there's even that much of a chance. Because it keeps us from getting big heads, right?
Yeah.
It keeps us from getting arrogant. That there's gotta be some other stuff out there. The chances are small, but concrete. And he goes into the cosmic cookbook next. Is that how you got talking about cooking? Is it cosmic? And he talks about, what needs to happen for that Goldilocks zone, for things to come together. And then page 134. Let's see. Halfway down. Says this is nice. He gave us this little highlighted spot. Here's the clip and save point. All right, here's the thing he wants us to know. There are amazingly few recipes in the cosmic cookbook in which life is permitted. The overwhelming, and by this I mean totally way overwhelming, majority of recipes produce barren universes. There are many conditions for a cosmos to be compatible with life, it turns out, and nearly zero recipes meet all of those conditions. Many are barren because in them planets cannot maintain stable orbits around their host stars. Others are barren because they do not last long enough for life to evolve. Others because the chemicals required for life never form. Other universes are barren because stars never form, or because they do form, but their temperatures never stabilize, or because they burn through their fuel too quickly. All 6 numbers, he talked about these different categories, have to be just right. He gets into some more math and physics here. He says, for example, one number called epsilon measures the rate at which stars convert hydrogen into helium. This number happens to have the value of 0.007. If it were 0.006, there would be no helium or carbon or oxygen, no life. If it were as high as 0.008, then no hydrogen remained and water couldn't exist. So in neither case would we be here at all. All 6 numbers are fixed within similar bounds, so they each have this little narrow range that would make it work. To get a sense of the probability involved, consider this picture. You are standing 15 feet from a wall. On the wall are drawn in random locations 6 small squares, each one as a ½ inch on a side. You are given 6 darts and are blindfolded. You are then pointed toward the wall and told to throw all 6 darts in one heave. Imagine your surprise when you remove your blindfold to find 1 dart in each of the 6 tiny boxes. That is the kind of surprise I'm talking about. The numbers. So you don't have to understand. That's why I skipped over some of the more scientific stuff. But I like that illustration, right? That's the probability that any universe would have life,
as we understand.
as we understand. Because if you get the Star Trek, they're like, oh, it's a silicone-based life form. Oh, it's a life form that lives out in the cosmos and skips along from nebula to nebula, right? You use your imagination.
So God created all this, but then he picked out one special planet. It would be,
Well, that's what he's saying, as far as we know, but there could be something else somewhere else.
More than one experiment.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Could just
Yeah.
go, right?
We're one
So-
dish, somebody's another feature.
Our revelation, our scripture is for us in
Yep.
our context and in our combination that creates life. I would that challenge some things for me to know that God also created and loved other peoples on other planets? Maybe. But that's God's prerogative.
But it doesn't change a thing.
God loves, it tells us in the Bible, he loves the desert plants, he loves the Leviathan, he loves everything, so. And Job tells us, you're not special, and you don't understand it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why a lot of people don't like Job, I get that, I understand why Job is unpopular. But it helps, it helps me a lot grasp
Yep.
the premise of everything else in it.
I appreciate Job more than I ever did before.
So let's keep it going. 135. Oh, somebody about to say something? Thought I heard somebody take a breath. Go ahead.
This may sound almost sacrilegious, but okay, there's this whole universal out there, God could have made other universes, other places where intelligent life is.
Mhm.
Should ask this.
Go for it. Go for it.
So where's God?
That's the honest answer, right?
I mean, the way he described the medieval system was that, well, God is up here, there's these layers, and we're down here, there's this structure. I don't know, is God corporeal, or was that just Jesus? Is God spirit? Is God dark matter, the thing that people just realize is holding everything together? Is God,
But I guess where I'm coming from is that in the creed, it says he ascended into heaven. Okay, I can take that.
sure,
But then if we say that the cosmos is, you know, changing all the time, I don't know, it just, I'm having trouble.
what's the famous equation? E equals mc squared. Energy is mass times the speed of light squared, right? So we're doing a lot of algebra lately with Kate. And you move things around to solve for the variables, right? So a lot of science fiction also says, there's always the storyline where somebody goes into the next plane of existence. They become pure energy. Well, if mass and energy are related, then who's to say that there's some plane of existence of energy where there's still awareness, sentience? Maybe God is on some plane of pure energy. I don't know.
I think that's, we as humans try to put God on a plateau concrete plateau that we understand,
Of course,
and it's nothing like that.
probably not.
We will never know
I don't know where
until,
God is.
Well, I don't know, the God that left me into trouble and kind of always felt like he was in heaven, and that was the place.
Yeah,
Not that it's up here or
Right.
around me,
right.
but it was always a place, but now it's kind of seems like it's not a place.
So let me,
It's too complicated.
let me share some vocabulary that helped me before, coming from a different angle. So Luther has this teaching called two kingdoms. That, in his day, it was all kings and princes, and you had your peasants and you had your, everything had a structure to it, right? So in the same way, he grew up learning this scholastic theology. So here's the king, here's the people, here's God, here's us. So he talked about this teaching called two kingdoms, that God is working through the left-hand kingdom of the world. Laws that tell you to stop at a stop sign, that tell you not to murder your neighbor. Institutions like governments and like churches, that God is working through those things. But there's also a right-hand kingdom, the more spiritual side, where God is working to convict us of our sin and drive us towards the gospel. And that he was saying that to try to get across that it's not like here's the world and here's God, that God is at work through both. Well, fast forward to when I was in seminary, and we had a very wise professor with a very big beard, so that added to his wisdom. Very deep voice, intense eyes. You paid attention. He was teaching this concept of two kingdoms. He said, I don't like calling it two kingdoms because we don't live in a kingdom, right? That's how do we relate to them? So he said, I would rather call it two strategies. Right, that God has this strategy of working through the world, this strategy of working through our spirits, through our hearts. So I bring that up to say, heaven is a place, heaven is where God dwells, where Jesus ascended to. Maybe it's not a place in the way we think of a place, like we think of a kingdom, right? Heaven is a castle. But we can substitute strategy for kingdom there, we can substitute realm for a place.
In the
Maybe.
beginning of the book, it talks about change. There's a class where there was, she asked, what keeps them all?
Yeah.
And you have to change the way the kids think about it. And that's feels like what this is doing.
Yeah. I believe that, like we said, where is God? I don't know. What is God? Not completely sure either. But all the things that we've also talked about throughout this conversation through this book, that God is at work in our lives. That God does want the world to live up to the creation, that turning things towards good. That the messiness of our lives is not some, dunce cap on our heads, some punishment. But that God is in the messiness with us and trying to be with us and help us. I truly believe in God's presence and God's activity, God's direction, Spirit. I believe that Jesus was Word of God made flesh to change our lives and save us. I don't know the logistics of all of that. And even if this dismantles some of or pushes against some of the things that we hold dear, like whatever our picture of heaven is, I think I can handle having some of that pushback and still trusting that there is a place, a somewhere, or something that God is calling us towards, something better. But I think it can be helpful to shake up our conceptions sometimes. Because if we get too locked in, we might miss something.
Well, I like the fact that, like in the cosmos that we're used, it's all mixed up and he's not controlling. So therefore, all things in this world that are bad, these are things that he's controlling.
Yeah.
So I don't know, that kind of explains some of it to me that, people would say, well, okay, this guy wasn't, it's like Joe, this guy wasn't living a godly life. This nation is doing too bad, so gotta punish them. Well, in the cosmos where it's all mixed together and God is controlling all that, then that would make sense.
Because otherwise you have to be the one who's in God's place, picking and choosing, interpreting. Well, Hurricane Katrina, that's because of all that sin down there in the Big Easy. And that was a punishment. Well, what about the people who lived behind a levee that the powers that be didn't maintain and said, it's okay if this part gets flooded? Did God punish them too? Like, you have to start then picking and saying, like, well, God did this to them because they were bad, but this person was spared. Like, you could have the people on either side of the curtain in the hospital room, right? Sharing a recovery room, and both have families there, both praying for them to recover, and one dies and one gets better. Now, if you believe in a God that controls everything, that everything happens for a reason, then you have to be like, sorry, grieving family, your person that you loved might have been a saint on earth and gave to the poor and never failed to stop and help a stranger. But man, there must have been some sin, like Job. He must have missed something. They must have done something wrong to get this cancer to die. And this person over here, like for instance, my dad eats the worst possible diet I could ever imagine. All fried and canned food, hardly any fruits and vegetables, like all processed stuff. He's been doing this for years. And my mom, at the first second that she found out she had high cholesterol, did her best to read the labels and cut back, and nothing, even on pills, nothing brought that cholesterol down. My dad eats like crap, and he'd go to the company nurse and then maybe check his cholesterol. I'm like, yeah, it's good. There's the person on the other side of the curtain might be somebody who lives their life the equivalent of my dad's diet and just does nothing but bad stuff, and they recover from their cancer. Like, if God is really truly in control of every single thing and pulling every lever and tweaking every string, then that puts us in the position of having to then say, these people were good and these people were good. As opposed to, God even loves Leviathan. So God's going to get in the mix. If this person died of cancer, then God's going to send the Spirit to that family and try to turn things towards the good. If this person survived, then we'll give thanks for that. God's gonna send the spirit to try to turn the situation to good.
That's him using chaos.
Yeah,
Cosmos.
well, that's one of the things that's gonna stay with me from this book is that chaos is fertile
Alive and
ground,
well.
right?
It's alive and well.
Doesn't answer all the questions, doesn't alleviate every concern or uneasy feeling I ever have. But
It does add a variable to the equation that wasn't there before.
yeah. Um. Heck did I write here? Oh, I said we get sciencey. That's. Let's do 135, that last paragraph. Now, there is a certain sense in which this is unremarkable. Of course, the numbers are right. We wouldn't be having this conversation. We wouldn't exist if the numbers weren't right, okay? If even one of them fell outside its box, we would not be here to notice it. But others see the fine tuning of these numbers as a highly significant fact. They draw a different wall-oriented analogy, that of a firing squad. Suppose you are put up against the wall and a dozen people shoot at you with rifles from close range. After the roar of gunshots fades, you are shocked to find yourself still alive, untouched by a single bullet. On one hand, you could say, well, of course they missed me. If they hadn't, I wouldn't be here to realize it. On the other, as you lie in bed on the first night of your new life, you will wonder deep down why you're not dead. Something must have happened back there at the wall. Perhaps in the immortal words of Pulp Fiction's Jules Winfield, who also gets shot at and all the bullets miss, God got involved. We look for meaning. That's right after he quotes scripture. Seen that movie. The next section, the cosmos that knew we were coming. He says, my problem with this idea of multiverse, we don't need to get into multiverses. God is not a knob twiddler of any variety. He says down at the bottom 136, I am unable to ignore this fact. The cosmos is narrowly fit for life, but didn't have to. The firing squad analogy carries weight with me. As Churchill said, nothing in life is so exhilarating as to be shot at without results. I am both exhilarated and grateful when I look out at the cosmos and think of those 6 numbers. It makes me feel as Freeman Dyson might have felt when he wrote, as we look out into the universe and identify the many accidents of physics and astronomy that have worked together to our benefit, it almost seems as if the universe in some sense must have known that we were coming. Maybe in other words, that's the whole, said something design, what's that phrase? Yeah, intelligent design, that somebody made it.
Oh, yeah.
I say that I read it one time, it's described as the fingerprint of God. The fact that those numbers have to be in there and that the harmonics are showing us that it's not a static universe. And there's so many things going on out there that just lead to a creator of creating the universe. We may not understand the intent of that creation at this point in time, where we are in our development investigation, but clearly that there was some sort of creator involved here.
Yeah, but then he puts an asterisk on it, the whirlwind principle. He says, okay, not just us. It's not that the universe knew that we were coming, but the universe knew that life was coming. He says, I've already suggested a model of creation as gradual, continuous, and open-ended. In this view, God is essentially creative and works cooperatively with the cosmos as it stands, continually drawing out the possibilities inherent in its chaotic raw material. This is done always with the participation of creatures and is never opposed to creation as it stands. This model not only resonates with a universe in which both structure and creatures emerge slowly, but it suggests that God is always creating across the cosmos and not just locally. If this model of creation is correct, if billions of habitable planets exist in the cosmos, well tuned for life and in keeping with the whirlwind principle, we are not a central or specially favored species in the cosmos. The answer must be that we are not alone. There are others out there, probably many of them, There's an awful lot of out there.
Yeah, that's right, I like that too.
A lot out there. So he says, so where
Space
is,
and space.
Renee does a section, so where is everybody? And he gets into some more, scientific speculation. I'm gonna come back to 139 here and finish the chapter there. Turning the telescope around. The jury is still out on the whirlwind principle. It's not clear whether it bears fruit or not that we are not the central, special, important thing. On the one hand, we have a theology that views God as essentially creative and a cosmos that is strangely fit for life. On the other hand, ET continues to elude us. It would make his theory hold more water that we're not special in the universe if there was actually something else in the universe that we found. In the face of this non-conclusion, I offer a confession. As optimistic as I am and as suggestive as Job is, I cannot help but sense a note of desperation in our quest for extraterrestrial intelligence. I think it's a symptom of profound loneliness, coupled with the collapse of traditional religion. But human beings cannot avoid religion altogether, so we listen. Night after night, we search the cosmos, waiting and hoping and listening and looking. With our telescopes, we gaze outward across billions of light years to the very edge of the Big Bang, desperate to find out where we came from, who we are, where we're going, and whether or not we are alone. We find Kepler 452b and the internet lights up. And we do all of this for the same reason we pray and sing and worship. We are a bewildered species, and we seek a connection to someone or something, visible or invisible. So perhaps the connection is out there. There's no scientific project more obviously religious than the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Now I'll go back to God, as we understand, is Trinitarian, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, co-eternal in relationship. Then that explains our searching, right? We want relationship. We want to know who we are and how we fit and how we fit. He says, in the end, however, this outward search is guaranteed to bring us back home. Let's perform a thought experiment. Let's place ourselves on Kepler 452b and turn those same telescopes around and observe us observing the universe. What a strange, strange sight. Aliens, extraterrestrial intelligence, ETs that pray, ETs that tell the truth and tell lies, ETs with fads, personality disorders, musical talents, and political ambitions. ETs that play games, build things, watch game shows, and chatter incessantly about themselves. What a discovery. It is, to my knowledge, by far the strangest view in the cosmos. And whether the ETs are here or there, well, that's neither here nor there. So, yeah, just imagine somebody else watching us and what they would think of us. That's chapter 9. Any other thoughts or questions? Anything we skipped over you want to go back to?
It's why we search for other forms of life, because we are, it's like the movie The Last Man on Earth, or you're by yourself. You don't like to be alone.
Oh, that Twilight Zone episode?
Yeah, you don't like to be alone. There's gotta be more.
Yeah.
So I think that's why we look, because we don't want to be solely responsible deep down.
Like I said, this chapter was a little more hypothetical speculation. But the point it's trying to say is, here's my theory that we are not, what is the role in prison? It's on page 1. Oh, where it is now. 127. The human species is not a central, specially favored species in the cosmos. So he's saying this is a scientific theory that he wants, and a religious theory based on Job and based on scientific observation. We are not, as a species, specially favored in the cosmos. So this whole chapter is saying, gee, I would like more proof for that theory by saying that we did find other life in the universe. That's like the 2-sentence version of this whole chapter. It doesn't necessarily fit in as well to the rest of the book. He's just saying, here's this kind of central thing I've been putting forth. I don't have the proof I wish I had. But I think it's out there, is what he said. Maybe that's another thing to say about God. We believe in God. We confess our faith in God. We do things to honor and follow God. We don't have really proof of that. I wish we had more proof of that. Some people try to find proof of that by doing what the creationists do, right? Trying to use scientific method to prove not scientific things. And other than that, you have to have faith. And you pray and you listen and you try to live a godly life and see what effect that has on other people. There's no proof to be had.
And just remember, you don't have all the answers, you never will.
Yeah, we don't know where heaven is or what it looks like. There's all the cartoons with the pearly gates and the clouds. But we don't know.
Streets of gold.
Streets of gold. I saw something great about that. Was that this book or was that somewhere else? Where they said the picture of heaven with streets paved with gold. Well, the streets in the Bible times, that's, think of Jesus washing feet. The streets were gross.
Yeah.
The streets were full of filth. So it's not saying that heaven is good by our standards, that the streets are paved with gold. It's saying that heaven is so far beyond our standards that what we value most, like precious metals, are used for the streets where the filth is. Right? I never thought of that before, and I read that a week or two ago.
I love the the Bible according to Mark 20, he has a line in there, it's where everyone, you talk about getting your wings and your harp, and he gets to heaven and he gets his wings in his harp, as he walks a little bit farther, he realizes the wings are heavy, so he sees a pile of wings where everyone took the wings off and threw them into a pile. And then he goes a little farther and everyone took their halo off, and there's a pile of halos, and he goes a little farther, there's a pile of harps, because no one knew how to play the darn thing anyhow, and he gets to and everyone's walking around, it's like, so don't try to take what we, even back in Mark Twain's day, the wrestling with this.
Twain has a way of cutting through our.
Other garbage.
I have a,
He's got a wit, and the way he put it in words is just.
I have a magnet on my fridge. We went to the, long story short, it was at the Mark Twain Museum in Hartford, which is a neat spot. And we have something on our fridge and something about. I can't remember it now. Something about the man and the ass, like the donkey. But something, but that discredits the donkey. I have a T-shirt from there too that says, suppose you were a member of Congress. Suppose you were an idiot, but I repeat. So yeah, Twain had a way of cutting through all of our,
But yeah, no, my other one from the ET thing, when he goes to it, there's a theory that every species that develops technology eventually develops technology that destroys themselves. And that's why we haven't seen other intelligent life. And I heard one that they think that every species has developed social media, and that's what destroyed the species, the ability to progress. I was like, there may be some truth in that.
Yeah, because are we really looking out at the cosmos anymore? Well, heads up, I was gonna actually use my phone as a prop for the children's film today, so sorry about that. I think that's it. We got one chapter to go. Next Sunday is Transfiguration Sunday, which is the last Sunday before Lent. So perfect. We'll get through this last one. It's called Coming Home. Thanks, everybody. Thank you at home.